Hello, welcome to this session where we're going to talk about drawing near to God. This is related to your prayer life, and there's wonderful things in the book of Hebrews on this subject. And my goal is to encourage you to draw near to God with an increasing frequency and with ever-increasing faith, and hopefully the verses that we're going to cover today will do a lot to bolster your faith along those lines. The Bible includes an old covenant and a new covenant. And the book of Hebrews argues that the new covenant has several things about it that are better than the old covenant. It's my belief that the ability to draw near to God is one of the things that was greatly improved when the old covenant was finished and the new covenant was inaugurated. A covenant is basically an agreement between parties, and it has specific terms that lay out how it's going to work. So it's up to us as Christian believers to exercise the privileges of the new covenant. And a minister a couple of years ago alerted me to the fact that so many of us live as if we were still under the old covenant in a mindset that's guilt-ridden, or just, not really grasping the great truths of the new covenant and the work that Jesus has completed for us. So if we're living like we're living under the old covenant, well, let's just stop and let's step up to live in everything that God has privileged us to have under the new covenant. In Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, today I'll be reading out of the English Standard Version, and we read, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin." So in this verse, we're talking about the high priest. And throughout the book of Hebrews, the priesthood is discussed at length. And I think part of the reason for that is that Hebrews is talking to people that were familiar with the old covenant and needed to get up to speed with the new covenant. And so in the old covenant, the priesthood was central to all their religious practice. And so you see throughout Hebrews a lot of discussion of the high priest and the priesthood and so on. But in this verse, it says that our high priest is not someone who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. First of all, in the old covenant, the high priest would go in once a year by himself with blood to the Holy of Holies to make sacrifice for the sins of Israel, and they would be covered for one more year. And the high priest, that was the highest position in the priesthood. Jesus Christ is our high priest today, in the heavenlies, in the Holy of Holies that exists in the presence of God. And it says here that he's not unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. And it's funny because you could just say Jesus sympathizes with our weaknesses. But it's stated in this sort of double negative way. He's not unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. And I believe that color and that language is there to bring emphasis to the point that, yeah, he does sympathize with our weaknesses. Why? Because he's one of us. He's a man. He was here. He lived it. And he knows what it's like to try to walk in faith in a fallen world. He knows what it's like to face every temptation. And we'll get to some of that in a minute. It said, well, right here in this verse, "But one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin." So first of all, Jesus has faced every type of temptation that there is. And that in some ways, it might seem like a sort of a pat statement. But in the book of Romans, it says, that whatever is not of faith is sin. And so there is an element of faith always in doing the right thing. And there's always an element of unbelief in sin. So whatever temptation you're facing, sometimes I just look for, well, where's the unbelief? What would be the opposite of that? And then start moving toward God. But our high priest, he's able to sympathize with our weaknesses. You know, you could choose a priest from among people, and probably according to what he's experienced, he would have sympathy for others. But a lot of times, if we haven't been through it ourselves, it's hard to come up with any sympathy toward someone else that's struggling in a certain category. And I know in things that have been difficult for me, I have a lot of feeling for other people that struggle in those areas. And things that have been easy for me, I want to just say, why don't you just straighten up, you know? So Jesus is not unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, and that goes all the way across every type of temptation, because he himself has been tempted in those ways. Chapter 12 of Hebrews, the end of verse 1 and the start of verse 2 says, "And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith." To avoid temptation and to walk by faith, we look to Jesus because he did it. He's been there. He did it in this same world that we live in. And, you know, when you're running a marathon and you're halfway there, you can't see where you started and you can't see where you're going to finish. And running with patience, the race set before us is a lot like that. A lot of time, we spend more time out in the middle than we do at the start or at the finish. And because of that, the encouragement comes from looking to Jesus. He is the founder and he's the perfecter of our faith. So he showed us how it's done, and he works with us to help us walk in faith and continue in faith. Chapter 4 and verse 16, "Because of these things, let us with confidence draw near to the throne of God, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." And I love this verse, and it's an encouragement to every Christian believer. Let us with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. It's the word confidence. I memorized a definition a few years ago from a lexicon, and they defined this word as free-spokenness that is characteristic of a frank and fearless mind. What a state to draw near to God in. It's not like you're being blithe or stupid or throwing fits, but you're poised, you got your feet under you. You come with a free-spokenness that comes out of a mind or a consciousness that just doesn't have fear in it and knows that you can speak what you need to say. And so with that kind of confidence, we're encouraged to draw near to God. And this word simply means to make an approach. That is an action that I'm responsible for. And you as a Christian believer in your prayer life, you're responsible to take the action to draw near to God. And when we get in that place, it says that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I don't think an hour has to go by that doesn't define where I am. I need the mercy of God to cover my mistakes and to forgive me. And I need the grace of God to pour out on me and make a way for me. And these things are available to you and to me. So bless you as you draw near to God with that free-spokenness and expect His mercy and His grace and His help, whatever your time of need is.